The mic stand was ready for Elvis, but halfway through the set, he stopped, looked left. In the wings stood a man in overalls, holding a mop. "Come, sing with me," Elvis said. It was 1975, in a packed arena in North Carolina. The janitor froze. "Before we tell you how a mop turned into a microphone, and why the video traveled the world, make sure you stick around. This one moment showed millions the kind of man Elvis really was." The brass section was in full swing, horns bright against the low thump of the bass. It was October 1975, Greensboro Coliseum, North Carolina. 17,000 seats, every one filled. Spotlights swept over a sea of faces. The air smelled faintly of popcorn and cigarette smoke. From center stage, Elvis Presley leaned into the mic. His white jumpsuit caught the light like polished bone. He was halfway through Can't Help Falling in Love when something in the wings pulled his gaze. A man stood there, faded denim overalls, a dark t-shirt, one hand gripped a mop handle. The other rested on the edge of a dented steel bucket. Under the stage lights, the water inside shimmered, ripples catching every note. Witnesses recall his name was Ray, mid-50s, grey at the temples. The kind of man you'd pass in a hallway and nod to without a word. He wasn't part of the show. He wasn't supposed to be this close to the band. Elvis's voice trailed off. The crowd murmured. The band's rhythm softened, then quieted altogether. The only sound was the low hiss of an amp and the faint shuffle of feet in the upper tiers. Elvis tilted his head, as if reading a silent cue only he could see. He lifted one hand from the mic stand and motioned toward Ray. Ray shook his head quickly, eyes wide. He mouthed, "No." From the front row, someone laughed nervously. Elvis smiled slow, deliberate, like a man with all the time in the world. He stepped away from the spotlight, across the stage, and down toward the wing. The audience leaned forward, the tension so thick you could hear the creak of the wooden risers. "Come on, man," Elvis said quietly, just loud enough for the nearest mic to catch it. "Sing with me." Ray looked at the mop in his hands, then back at Elvis. His knuckles tightened on the handle. Without another word, Elvis reached out and took the mop, leaning it against the wall. He placed a steadying arm around Ray's shoulders. The gesture was casual, but the message was clear. You belong here. They walked together toward the center of the stage. Every step was met with a deeper hush. Somewhere in the crowd, a camera flash popped, the light freezing them mid-dash stride. At the mic stand, Elvis didn't start singing again. He glanced at the band, then back at Ray. A beat of silence. "You're about to hear something special," he told the audience. The words hung in the air, heavier than any note. Ray's shoulders stiffened under Elvis's arm. The arena lights were hotter here, the kind that make your collar itch and your eyes water. From the seats, thousands of faces stared back, curious, skeptical. Elvis reached for a second mic from the stand beside the drums. The cord uncoiled with a soft snap. He placed it gently in Ray's hands. Ray's fingers fumbled with the cool metal. The crowd murmured whispers, bouncing from one section to the next. A janitor on Elvis Presley's stage. Ray took a shallow breath. His chest rose and fell quickly. Then a pause. He closed his eyes. The first note slid out, low, smooth, and steady. It carried a weight, like it had been waiting years to be heard. The tone was gospel-rich, each syllable rounding in the air before floating into the rafters. A ripple moved through the audience, the kind that shifts posture, brings hands to mouths. The brass section glanced at each other. Drummers. Eyes widened. Some say Ray had sung in a church choir back in his hometown. Others believe Elvis had overheard him backstage once and filed it away for the right moment. Elvis nodded to the band. They slipped seamlessly into the opening chords of Amazing Grace. Ray's voice found the melody like it was home, his pitch held unwavering, as though every seat in the arena were just one pew in a tiny chapel. By the second verse, something had changed. The polite claps from the first line gave way to people rising from their chairs. A woman in the front row pressed a tissue to her eyes. Two ushers stopped mid-dial, mouths open. Elvis stood just behind Ray, close enough for his voice to blend, but never overshadow. Every so often, he'd glance sideways, almost proud, as though watching a student exceed the lesson. The camera operators, who moments earlier had been panning for fan reactions, locked in on the pair. One wide shot caught the whole stage. The king in white, the janitor in overalls, and a microphone holding both their histories. Halfway through the song, Ray's voice climbed, not strained, but lifted each note, opening like a door you didn't know was there. The arena roared. People clapped in rhythm, stomping the beat into the concrete floor. For a moment, it was no longer a concert. It was a shared prayer. Then came the final line. Ray held it, eyes still shut, pouring every fragment of himself into the note. When it finally faded, there was no immediate applause, just a heartbeat of stunned silence. Elvis stepped forward. Without a word, he reached up and untied the silk scarf from around his neck. Fans knew these scarves. They were prizes, keepsakes, fought over in the pit. Elvis draped it over Ray's shoulders, the white fabric bright against the denim. The crowd erupted, the kind of applause that comes from witnessing something you know you'll never see again. And as the cheers swelled, Elvis leaned into the mic, but didn't sing. Instead, he said something that would echo far beyond the arena. The applause that night shook the rafters. But what no one knew, not yet, was that a single camera in the crowd had caught all of it. It was a bulky VHS camcorder, the kind you balanced on your shoulder. The man holding it had no press pass, just good seats and a habit of filming anything worth remembering. His wife, years later, would say he couldn't take his eyes off the janitor. 3 days after the show, local news aired the grainy clip. No introduction, no commentary, just the mop in the wings, the invite, and the voice. Phones started ringing at the station. Who was he? Does he have a record? Play it again. By the end of the week, newspapers had the headline, "The Singing Janitor." Some papers ran still photos. The scarf draped over Ray's shoulders, Elvis grinning like a proud older brother. Others printed side-by-sides, the man with the mop and the man at the mic. National entertainment shows picked it up. One even flew a crew to Greensboro to find Ray. When they did, he was back in his overalls, pushing a broom in the empty arena after a basketball game. They asked how it happened. Ray just shrugged. "I came to work." When reporters turned to Elvis for his side, he downplayed it. "I just gave him a mic," he told one interviewer. The rest was all him. Clips of the performance began circulating through fan clubs. Bootleg VHS tapes traded hands, each copy fuzzier than the last, but still carrying the moment in full. For some, the magic wasn't just the song, it was the way Elvis looked at Ray, not as a charity case, not as a prop, but as an equal. And then, just when the buzz began to fade, a delivery truck pulled up to the side entrance of the Coliseum. It was 1 week to the day since the concert. Inside a plain cardboard box was something wrapped in brown paper. The stage manager opened it first. Beneath the wrapping lay a guitar, sunburst finish, 6 strings tuned and ready. On the back, written in gold marker, were the letters. EP taped to the case was a folded card. It read, "You'll always have a seat in the front row." Elvis, the manager, drove it straight to Ray's small brick house on the edge of town. When Ray opened the door, he stared at the guitar for a long moment before touching it, as though afraid the gold ink might vanish. No one could have guessed then that this wasn't the last gift connected to that night. Ray kept the guitar in his living room, just above the brick mantel. It was the first thing visitors saw when they stepped inside. A simple wooden plaque hung above it. "Do not touch." Neighbors say he'd take it down some evenings after work. He'd sit in a worn recliner, feet planted, and strum the chords Elvis had shown him backstage that night. C, G, and D. The sound filled the small room, bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. Ray never learned every chord. He didn't have to. For him, the guitar wasn't about music alone. It was proof that someone, even the king, had seen him, not just as a man with a mop, but as a man worth hearing. The years rolled on. The VHS clip found new life, first on TV specials, then passed around on early internet forums. When YouTube arrived, a fan uploaded the grainy footage. Within weeks, hundreds of thousands of views. People in the comments didn't just talk about Ray's voice. They talked about Elvis's face as he listened, the way he leaned back, eyes half closed, letting Ray take the lead. One post read, "This wasn't a duet. This was a man stepping aside so someone else could shine." Another, "You can tell they're singing to each other, not just to us." Ray never chased the attention. He still swept the arena floors after games, still clocked in at 7 a.m., still pushed the same grey mop bucket. But every so often, a fan would recognize him and stop to shake his hand. The scarf Elvis had draped on him that night stayed folded in a shoebox in the top of his closet. He told friends it smelled faintly of cologne for years. Sometimes, on quiet Sunday mornings, he'd take it out, hold it for a while, and put it back without a word. One winter afternoon, decades after that night in 1975, Ray was in his kitchen pouring coffee when someone knocked at the door. It was a slow, deliberate knock, not the kind you give a stranger's house. On the porch stood a young man, mid-20s, holding something carefully in both hands. The cold air behind him smelled faintly of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. The man didn't speak right away. He looked down at the folded white fabric in his palms. Ray stepped closer. It was the scarf. Ray opened the door wider, letting the young man step inside. The scarf rested across his palms like something fragile. "My father caught this in Memphis," the man began. His voice was steady, but his eyes shifted between Ray and the scarf. "He saw that video of you and Elvis. Said this should be yours." Ray's hands trembled as he reached for it. The fabric was soft, the years having worn it thinner in spots. It still carried the faint scent of cedar from decades in a keepsake box. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Ray just held it, thumbs brushing over the edge where the stitching had frayed. Finally, Ray looked up. "Tell your father, thank you." The young man smiled. "He'll be glad to know it's home." That spring, the community center announced a local benefit concert to raise money for new instruments in the school's music program. Ray agreed to sing one song, just one. On the night of the benefit, folding chairs filled the small auditorium. Children from the school sat cross-legged in the front row. Ray walked onto the stage with the guitar Elvis had sent and the scarf draped over his shoulders. The crowd clapped, some recognizing him instantly, others from the stories they'd heard. He adjusted the mic, strummed a soft chord, and began Amazing Grace. His voice was older now, a little thinner, edges roughened by time, but the tone was still there. By the second verse, the room was quiet enough to hear the creak of the wooden floor under his chair. Near the end, Ray closed his eyes. The last note lingered just as it had decades earlier in Greensboro. When it faded, the applause came in waves, filling the small space with warmth. It was the final time Ray would sing in public. Months later, when he passed away, the guitar and scarf were donated to that same community center. They were displayed in a glass case with a simple plaque. Kindness can stop a room. Over the years, visitors would stop in front of the case, some recognizing the objects instantly, others leaning in to read the story beneath. Teachers told students about the night a janitor sang with Elvis Presley. The old VHS clip still circulates online, shared in posts about unexpected kindness and second chances. Every time someone new discovers it, they ask the same question in the comments: who was the man with the mop? The answer is in that voice, the scarf, and the guitar, and in the choice Elvis made to pause his show and share his stage. If this moved you, share it with someone who believes music and kindness can change a life. And tell me in the comments, what's one moment of unexpected kindness you'll never forget? Years after Ray's passing, the glass display at the community center became a quiet landmark. The scarf, still folded neatly beside the guitar, sat under warm light. The gold ink of EP had dulled slightly, but the signature was unmistakable. The small brass plaque beneath told the whole story in 2 sentences. On October 10th, 1975, Elvis Presley invited janitor Ray to sing on stage. This guitar and scarf are reminders that kindness can stop a room. People came from nearby towns, sometimes even from other states, just to see them. A few brought their children, explaining in hushed tones how a simple act had turned an ordinary man into part of music history. Some say former band members from that night visited quietly over the years, pausing in front of the case without signing the guest book. Others recall seeing aging Elvis fans, eyes wet, whispering along to the lyrics of Amazing Grace as they looked through the glass. The original VHS tape, long since digitized, now sits in the local historical societies' archives. When they play it during special events, the audience reaction is always the same. Gasps during the invitation, smiles when Ray starts singing, and a wave of applause at the scarf moment. In 2015, the clip resurfaced on social media, racking up millions of views in just a week. Comments poured in from around the world, from fans in Japan who'd never seen Elvis live, to gospel singers in small-town America who said Ray reminded them of someone in their own congregation. One post read, "The real magic here isn't the voice. It's the way Elvis steps back. That's how you know it was about more than music." That single performance became part of the law fans' trade at meets and memorabilia shows. It isn't as famous as his Vegas years or the '68 comeback. Special, but for those who've seen it, it's unforgettable. And that's the thing about moments like this. They don't make the set list, but they make the legacy. In interviews late in his life, Elvis was often asked about his favorite performances. He gave different answers, but more than one person swears they heard him mention a janitor in North Carolina who could sing like the angels. Ray never made a record. He never toured, never sold his story. But every time someone watches that clip, his voice fills the room again, and for a few minutes, the king shares his crown, the scarf, and guitar still sit in their glass case, not far from the old Colosseum where the moment happened. If you walk in on a quiet afternoon, you might hear the faint hum of a vending machine in the corner, the shuffle of a volunteer sweeping the floor. It's almost fitting, the sound of work being done, just as it was that night before Elvis called Ray forward, because at its heart, this wasn't just a story about music. It was a story about being seen, about the kind of kindness that leaves a mark no spotlight can match. And for those who were there and the millions who've watched since, it's a reminder that sometimes the most unforgettable moments happen when the music pauses.